Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We've got a super special guest today who we can describe as reframing the world's biggest problems as important design challenges. She is a global thought leader who rigorously collaborates with people, places, and organizations to provoke and maximize positive transformation. As co-founder and Chief Insights and Analytics Officer of Massive Change Network, she is deeply curious about the socio-emotional effects of how change is embraced and absorbed. A self-described non-expert, her unique design approach holistically bridges the worlds of data, stories, and the humanities to probe new ways of thinking and doing. Please join me in welcoming Bisi Williams. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Thomas. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. You ready for 20 questions?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, here we go. Number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
So my name is Ayemo Bisi Williams, and my friends and colleagues call me Bisi. I am a researcher and designer at a company that I co-founded with my husband, Bruce Mao, and currently also in the process of taking on the role of a co-creator for an exposition that we're planning, which is outside of our consulting. So that's what I do right now. I kind of bring all these different worlds together.
I just found out about you, but I must have been introduced to Bruce Mao's work when the Massive Change exhibition came up in Vancouver, and that was, I think, the first time a designer had entered the art gallery space in Vancouver, and that was a special time for a lot of us here. Number two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
So two things. A key piece is I guess I'm the consummate outsider insider, and I'm just deeply curious. So those are the two things I think that kind of define me and what makes me different, I think.
Nice. I mean, I think a lot of us are probably curious about you at this point. I feel like you've kind of started to enter into this kind of front-facing space where we didn't know behind the scenes of, what was kind of contextualizing a lot of what Bruce Mao was doing. And now as his kind of identity expands, we see you and we see other pieces that we didn't see before. So it's super interesting.
Thomas, thanks for that question. I mean, I used to be called the minister without portfolio until such time as I decided to take on a portfolio. And yes, I mean, I'm a researcher and generally behind the scenes, but I also work as a strategist for our company and our clients. And so the question became, can strategy and research be as sexy as applied design? And we agreed that yes, it can be. And in fact, it's an integral part of how we work. We think about whole brain design or whole brain thinking. And I joke sometimes that, I could be like freak the mighty, like half a brain. But holistically, when we look at our studio, we realize that bringing the disciplines together of the humanities and design is super important. And then with that, an added layer of technology, which is, a question you're going to ask later on. And so when we look at that, we're really looking at the nexus of art, science, and technology, and how we can bring those worlds together to solve some of the greatest challenges that we're facing within our own work in our studio, but that also that our clients are facing, and that, as an observer, a person who's just interested in how the world works, how I can look at that and use my unique set of skills to be of service to our clients and our world and our studio. So you're right. So in that sense, in this case, I realize data and how we tell and how we use data, stories are super important. And also just looking at what are other people's stories, in the way that you're curious about how other people live and work. I'm deeply curious about that. So when I think of myself as a designer, I really think of myself as a student of life, right? How do we live? And then how do we use our collective skills to actually design how we live better?
Great. I feel like that's kind of an answer to number three, but maybe I'll just re-ask three here. So why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Well, I do this because I always think, what if we did something different? And why does it look like this? And why do we do things like that? And if we did something else, could it be better? And I have a strange perspective in the world. I'm Canadian born. My parents are immigrants, Nigerian, Jamaican. I now live in the United States. If you think about, how you look at the world and how people do things differently and local solutions. And I realize I can take those learnings from the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere and, the industrialized North and the developing South, and look at the in between of all those things and think, well, how can we do this in a cooler, more equitable way, and how can we use design to actually bridge those gaps? It's not a one size fits all solution, and that's when I recognize that having that a sort of more of a literary worldview in terms of how stories come together, how data comes together, this is the perfect marriage for me to use my full set of skills, things that I love to do, things that I'm curious about, and apply them every single day, is really cool. I think it's the best thing that I could imagine for me. And I'm super grateful that I have this opportunity to work in this way.
Great. Okay. Number four, some people struggle with this these days, but the question is, what does your future look like?
That's such a funny question because I'm spending all my energy trying to be present, but I do think about the future a tremendous amount, and I'm bullish. I feel like I'm just getting started, and when I look around and I see how everything in the world needs to be redesigned and that people are actually open to it, not so much resistance. It makes me super optimistic, and realizing that the challenges that we face are great, but not actually taking the time to think about it or pursue it would be a missed opportunity. So I feel like my future is, I'm bored at the right time. I feel like I'm fit for purpose to live and work in this era.
Yeah, I feel like, as designers, we straddle problem solving and opportunity finding, but more and more these days, a lot of the bigger designers are gravitating towards looking for opportunities. Number five, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Wow, I love this question, Thomas. Place is super important. I grew up in Winnipeg and the open prairies, and I used to always imagine the whole universe in front of me, especially in the wintertime when you look at the open plain. And I would just imagine worlds and solutions and people. And I think place is a super important idea, where you lay your feet and where you create your dreams. And so that place for me of growing up with 100% freedom of the imagination, that place of growing up without any hierarchies or ways that you're supposed to do things. You really grew up in a frontier society. Now, not that Canada isn't sophisticated, it's incredibly sophisticated, but it was also a time of nation building, and finding their place. And I just happened to be lucky that my parents dropped there from halfway around the world and met there at University of Manitoba. And that notion that one could do anything and you could bet on everyone was just something for me that was kind of like mother's milk. And so as a result of being born in a place of possibility and access, and, allowing for imagination, not crazy imagination, right? Because, Canada is a place where you need to be mindful also of the effect that you have on others. So that idea of stretching in space was really formative, I feel. And so when I'm traveling around the world, I recognize I try and find the piece of ground where I can imagine in the collaboration or in the place that I'm exploring, little me growing up and how I would imagine my world growing up in a place. Like when you're in Venice, it looks very different. When you're in Abu Dhabi, it looks very different. When you're in Jamaica or Nigeria or Guatemala. But I always imagine, what would it be like to grow up here? And what would I do differently, or what could be possible? And so I think that I respect place. And I think when you're collaborating with someone or when you're working on a project, you really need to look at the terroir, the ground. You wouldn't impose something that you would do in Canada in the South, and vice versa. But what's the beautiful essence of that experience in those places that you can carry with you, I think, in this certainly post-Westphalian world. So I really actually look at that question of place. It's super important. And, my parents moved from Jamaica and Nigeria, respectively, and moved to Winnipeg. Subsequently, they moved back. I've moved my family here to Chicago, and have a deep fascination with the place of America. And I find that it's a real gift to be able to look at the world and place with multiple lenses. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah, years ago, I was teaching design in New Delhi in India, and I took my students for a walk around the neighborhood, and I said, look around, everything's actually been considered, been designed, all of these, the widths of the roads, the heights of the buildings and the infrastructure, everything's thought out. People have planned the majority of this. And I think I was teaching my students I was teaching myself as much as I was teaching my students. And when I came back to Canada, I kind of had that view and had the eyes to kind of apply what you're talking about, I think, a little bit more. It's weird growing up in Canada and having to go somewhere else to realize that. Yeah.
It's true. That's the greatest gift of Canada, I feel, Thomas. We realize just how blessed we are. It's very stable. It's very egalitarian. And you just think every place is like that. And then you lament, oh, well, where's the drama, which there isn't very much of. And then you begin to appreciate that, in a new way. And so I have tremendous love for that space. But I also have a tremendous love for adventure too. So very cool that you took your students on a field trip. I think field tripping is super important in life too, if you have the opportunity.
Awesome. Okay, number 6. If you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
I love this question too. I would just say, let the weirdness out sooner. Stop being so cool. Stop trying to manage everything. And you know what? Just let your imagination fly. Don't hold it back. That would be my advice. And it, you get it, you're looking for norms, you want to fit in, you want to make sure that, like, is this okay? Am I doing it right? But you realize, like, at a certain point, if you want things to be different and you're thinking different and you can imagine another solution, that's also a gift. And so use it, don't waste it, and use that imagination for public good. So that would be my advice, quit with the cool.
Nice, I love it. Number 7, what's a day in your life like?
That's a day in my life. So it varies almost every day. So day in my life, I mean, it starts with a few things. So I do read, and that is the greatest gift. And a lot of thinking and contemplating and reading some more and looking out the window. And then, engaging in the work and ideas. Part of it is client work. And then part of it is our own project in our studio to be our own client. So looking at the creative projects that we're using to sort of further our thinking and to further our practice in terms of what we do and how we communicate. So that would be a typical day. A lot of it's changed with the pandemic, as I'm sure everyone else has witnessed that. I think my time and attention on the Zoom calls, if you will, that's been an interesting transition in the work, in that more relational, I guess, is it that, you collaborate
Mhm.
more deeply, more in a weird interface of face-to-faceness. So that's changed how my day works considerably. And um, having clients from around the world, you realize it's a 24-hour world. So we sort of shift, so early mornings for certain parts of the world and then late evenings for the other. And it's kind of exciting to be tapped in that way. That has really changed the way that my day works. So, and I kind of like it, I think.
I like that. Growing up, I was always taught that art is about doing things for yourself and design is about doing things for others. And it's super interesting to have that kind of design lens, but focused on yourself. I liked how you talked about that. Number 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic these days. How do you stay up to date?
I love this question too. So one of my mantras is not just mine, but I think the currency for the 21st century is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And we're constantly learning. We get new, interesting, and weird problems. And so in this case, I think it's so important to be curious about the world around you. I think it's important to understand how people work and why they do those things. And so for me, it's just everywhere. It's news, books, reading, listening, talking to folks, and just saying, wow, like that's a decision you made. How cool. And then also just think, when you think about data and information and research, and you think
Mhm.
about, from my perspective, demographics, right? Okay, what are we going to do? We've got a further 2 billion people that are going to be onboarding on this planet in the next 30 years.
Mhm.
And they're going to need shoes and clothing and housing. And, obviously we're going to have to do it in a smarter, cooler, more sophisticated way. What does that look like? And how do we develop an abundance of mindset, because there's so much here, right? There's so many ideas and there's so many people, and that new solutions are required. And so it's like really learning about, well, who's doing something innovative and how can we share that, right? So that's really, and how can we use that, and vice versa. So that's really why I'm excited to be alive today. And that's why I'm continually learning. And then also having young adult daughters, their worlds and their worldviews very, very different, and it's
Mhm.
really interesting to see how they're vibing and what does that mean for the rest of the world in terms of values and what we want to produce and how we want to live. To me, it's just like I'm like a kid in a candy jar in terms of like, wow, what can we do differently? And how can we do this together? And how can we, build on the humanist experiment where, we actually take life into consideration? How do we design for life, for abundance, for fulfillment, for purpose? So that's what I like to learn about, and ways that we can hack that and incorporate that into our everyday.
Nice. Yeah. Somewhat recently, we had Debbie Millman on the show, who's the
Ah,
chair of the Master of Branding program at School of Visual Arts, among other things. And yeah, she talks about branding, but she talks about it in a way that I think she applies it to everyday life and to her own living. And what you're saying really reminds me of that as well.
it's interesting.
Um, yeah. Number 9, what tools do you use? Are you both digital and analog?
Yes, so that's a good question. I use digital tools. Hmm. However, I'm increasingly moving towards the analog. I think that, you know, technologies that we use on my laptop and my phone, obviously, I mean, those things are, the greatest gift ever. Um, that allows you to work quite quickly and to connect with folks. But I'm also really looking at my relationship to things. Do I have a relationship with it? I threaten, I say to my husband and business partner, Bruce, I'm about to get rid of my phone. I told him 18 months ago, that's
Mhm.
it. And he's like, you can't, you have a business. And I'm like, no, I think I can do without it. I think that there and what I really am curious about, and what we're really working on in our studio, is yes, we have these tools, but they should be in service to what we do. So what are we feeling? What's the emotion here, right? How do we, feel that paper, that presence, um, and the experiences that we build together. And so I use notebooks, and I have huge notebooks, and I've recently converted my family back to fountain pens, and we write, and it gives you a different kind of rhythm uh, to your work, when you write things by hand and you take that moment. And it goes back to using our tools for the art of living, right? Which is also kind of like the art of working. So my fountain pen and my inks with notebooks, my laptop, of course, and just really being mindful of what I use and how we use it and why we use it, and if we acquire things, why we need it. So that's been my space. But I mean, does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, I recently completed a master's, and I think during that master's period, I was using one app more than anything, and that was the Notes app. And I was
Right?
writing long papers on this Notes app. I was using it to the extent that it started glitching on me, like it wouldn't work properly.
Yes.
I would think it's definitely me wanting to get back to the pen and paper for sure.
Isn't that funny? I'm addicted to the notes too. I put all my notes in there. I mean, that's really how I work, out of notes, and I just take my research and stuff. So I get it. I
Yeah,
totally get it. I
cool.
love that.
Nice. We're halfway. Number 10. How do you deal with work-life balance?
Is there such a thing? I just I've been working on that to figure out what is work-life balance. But for me, I love what I do, and so it doesn't really feel like work. Um, but I do recognize I need to turn off. It's a weird moment when your kids are joking and they say that, that you're a workaholic. And I was like, wow, okay. But we talked about it and I realized, yeah, I do love to work. I get up every day. I'm excited to look at the challenges ahead, but I do recognize, um, for longevity's sake, that you do need to take breaks, right? You need to get away from your everyday, go in the garden, go on a trip, walk on the beach, walk in the sand, et cetera, stare at the window, bird watch. So I do make time for those things,
Mm.
so that you don't get lost. But I can equally get lost birding all day sometimes, and it's like miss some work calls. At the same time, I could also be deep in, a research project and not come up for air because it's so exciting. So I feel that it's like it ebbs and it flows. It's never 50-50, which I think I'm okay with.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I guess in part because I was trained as a designer in my teens, early 20s. So that's who I am. And I think that's true for a lot of designers, is that's kind of who you are. And so work life kind of blends into that. Number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
I would be doing exactly this. Otherwise, I'd be unhappy. I think, it's funny. You talk about being a designer and you have there's a discipline, there's a formal, and then there's the informal, the way that we look at, design outside of the disciplines. And I realized very early on, I designed my life to work on the things that I love to do, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds really weird. So it's haven't really had a plan, but it was more like, you know what, I'm really interested in this. Let's go explore that. So I'm going to design everything within my power to get the resources and the time and the space to be able to, so I started as a journalist, right? And I realized that I don't love,
Mm-hmm.
but I love the people component of journalism. So how would I translate that into the research and the discovery of meeting people and looking at new ideas? And then how would I, you know, design that so that I could have a life of ideas and, focused on purpose and being of service, to really use the collective power of thinking and teams and collaboration to imagine new worlds, world buildings, whether it's for businesses or companies or corporations or yourself. And so I'm continually thinking, yeah, this is really fun. And I'd like to explore that and sort out how to do it. So, when you asked me what the future holds, I guess it was a bit of a disingenuous answer in that I don't really know, but currently all the things that I'm working on, they're of interest to me and I'm super passionate about learning about them.
Nice, I like that. Number 12 is, what would you not like to do with your career?
So, can I be honest with you? It's like, the admin part, I think is really slow. I like math, but I don't love the math. And so for me, just getting to the good stuff is always it, which is the ideas. And I get it. You need to have a strong operational base in order to be creative. That's what most people don't realize, but it's like your operations need to be as strong, if not stronger, than the creative. But that does, your operation should not get in the way of the flow. And so, but in that sense, I would, love less of that, that part of it. And really just jamming on the work, I think is really exciting. So yeah.
That's
I'm a
nice.
terrible administrator, I guess is the word. It's like, that's the thing.
I like that you're talking about kind of getting into flow state. I had a student once who was a competitive rock climber and then came to study design under me, and found that they were actually quite related because of this flow state idea. Number 13, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Oh, wow. So my favorite is be brave and be kind. And that's the motto that I live with. I think that people need a little kindness and a little understanding and compassion. And on our work and I think about our life and I think about the world, we got here not because we were bad people, but we're actually really good people. But sometimes you make, bad design decisions that have unintended consequences, et cetera. And I recognize that, if you kind of if you could put yourself out there and, but also extend, a little bit of generosity and kindness to folks who are trying to solve problems so that, there's no shame or embarrassment, no shame, blame, or embarrassment. You get to solutions really quick. So those are the words I live by. It's just, how can we be helpful and how can we let people open up and solve those problems together, So that's it. Be brave, be kind.
Nice. And do you have a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Yeah, no. I'm like, I don't want the no factory, no is like, come on, man, like, unless you've really tried it, so that's my least favorite word is no. At least try. Yeah.
Good. 15, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would you choose?
I would choose the word resilient.
It's a good one.
Yes.
What keeps you up at night?
Oh, what keeps me up at night? If working fast enough, so can I answer those questions, get to solutions? Can I produce the tools or the products fast enough? Can I get this project, funded? So I sleep well at night, but the things that keep me up at night is like, wow, there's so much opportunity here. Can I meet the opportunity with time and resources? Which of course, yes, you can, but still there's that little moment where it's like, oh gosh, wouldn't it be cool if we just put this person together with that person or this project and so on, and then it could get jamming, you know what I mean? So that's what it keeps me up at night, is like just connecting the dots all the time and making sure that not only do I connect the dots, but that there's wraparound support for anything that we're doing. So that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Our last guest was Eric Speakerman, who's a typography legend, and he
Oh
was
man, yeah.
talking, yeah, and he was talking about running out of time and having enough time to do everything. I think that's kind of that's been a common one. Number 17, what's a dream you're chasing?
So the dream we're chasing, but it's actually becoming a practical reality, is an exposition of massive action where so this is the sequel, if you will, to Massive Change, and where we actually demonstrate proof and possibility of how the world is changing and what role design can play, and inviting folks from all walks of life and all areas of expertise, looking at art, science, and technology, to actually come together and look at this whole world of possibility and begin to apply it to our current situation. So it's like a life-centered design exposition that we are partnering with a number of institutions and universities to start to realize. So that has me completely stoked and amped. And so far the response has been terrific. And we will open in Sydney, Australia in Q1 of 2025. Among other places. And so I'm super passionate about that, and it's just so bullish about it because it's just been so inspiring to see both students, young people, business and faculties and so on really applying the full power of design thinking and using a sort of a life-centered approach, so going beyond human-centered to look at solutions, right, for our changing world, and but also finding that, just everywhere you look, there are just pockets of opportunities, right, for people to get involved, invest, and do things better than we've ever done them before.
That's great. Recently, we had Dr. Ron Wakari on the show, who released a book through MIT Press about more than human worlds. I feel like that's more and more of a trend, but it sounds like you're kind of going a step further with that, which is really, really great.
Well, what's exciting about that, though, is that, I mean, this is, for design, is that because we're redesigning everything, right? Designers do know, right? Like design is like painting with money. So the design decisions that we're making as we're building our worlds, we can do better, do differently, right? And if we all do it collectively, we can actually mitigate, right, our impact on the planet and on other living systems and on each other, right? And so that coexistence, I think, is kind of like the objective here. How do we do both? How do we do that right, without hurting anybody or things as much as possible?
Great. Okay. Final stretch, number 18. What inspires you?
Gosh, I'm inspired by like your show, right? Where you're looking at curiosity and how people tick and what makes them, do what they do in the world. I'm inspired by really this next generation of folks, and what their value systems are and what their hope is for, the world and the planet. And I can get on board with that, I feel, when you start thinking about how do we actually manage our resources? How do we actually build a world that's just and equitable? Even though we've been working on it incrementally, right? It's not that it's been bad, but I'm bullish on that. I'm bullish on watching them own their place in the world demographically, and also, thinking about how they want to make the world better. They're entrepreneurial and how they've come through the pandemic. I mean, it's been tough, but there's that resilience that they have, right? And that willingness to learn, which I find super inspiring, and try new things. So I'm super inspired by the young people in the world today.
Any advice you'd like to share?
Yeah. This seems dangerous for me giving advice, but I feel like I just say, look, folks, in your heart what's the right thing to do. So let's just start doing it. Let's not wait. Let's just do today whatever we can do to make your own life great, your family's life great, the community great, and the planet great. And I would say, if you find your purpose, totally jam on it, work on what you love, and like just get out there and do it.
Nice.
You
Thank
can do it.
you. No, it's good. And number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? Do you have a call to action or a specific thing we should look at?
Yeah, so on our massivechangenetwork.com, on our website there, and soon we will be Massive Action. So with Massive Action, we're looking for sponsors, collaborators, innovators, and thinkers to actually bring to bear their innovative solutions for, designing for life, right, on planet Earth, whether it's the built environment or machines or materials or you name it, looking for that inspiration of actionable projects, that will make the world better. So that's my call to action would be. We're looking for great, massive change thinkers who have action plans that they'd like to see realized.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This is really taking me back to massive change and some of the early ideas with that. But then to see that kind of continuing now, I think is super exciting. And for you to kind of announce that, at least I hadn't heard that there was going to be this follow-up. To hear about that now is super exciting. I'm very excited for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for allowing me to share. I love your show. So thank you. Keep doing it.
Thanks.